Hey everyone, it's Alex, and I am back with another 90th Academy Awards update video. One of many videos that I'm going to be putting out in the near future that I'm trying to catch up on. Admittedly, the news for this video came out almost a month ago. I've just been so busy with other things and other videos that I've been making that I haven't had time to make this video until now. But I am here today to talk about the contenders for Best Documentary Feature. Now this year, a record 170 films have been submitted in this category. And Best Documentary Feature is a category that has a lot of interesting rules as to what's eligible and what's not. So before I go over the contenders, I'm going to go over what those rules of eligibility are. And I had to actually print out the rules because there's quite a lot of them, but I'm not going to go over every single one of them. But I'm going to go over the most important ones, and I'm just using these rules here as a reference. So all the films had to be submitted by 5 p.m. Pacific time on Wednesday, September 20th, and they had to have had at least some kind of theatrical release. So even if a film premiered on Netflix or HBO or any other TV network, which it often will in the case of a documentary, if there's no theatrical release of any kind, then it's not eligible. And for documentaries, they have to have a theatrical release in both Los Angeles and New York. And not only that, but they must be advertised in certain newspapers. In New York City, the documentary must be advertised in either the New York Times, Time Out New York, or the Village Voice. And in Los Angeles, the documentary must be advertised in either the Los Angeles Times or LA Weekly. And the film must also have a review by a movie critic in either the New York Times and or the Los Angeles Times. And they even say here, if a television critic reviews the movie, then the film will not be considered eligible for this category. The review must come from someone who primarily reviews films, not television. That's a very interesting rule, but whatever. And also a new rule put into effect this year is that only single films will be counted. So films that are either one part of a limited series or all of a limited series will no longer be eligible. Earlier this year, the documentary O.J. Made in America, which was a mini-series originally aired on ESPN, but then given a small theatrical release to make it eligible for the Oscars, and it ended up winning the Oscar, and deservedly so, because it was absolutely fantastic. That will be the last time that a miniseries can win the Best Documentary Feature Oscar, because even though O.J. Made in America was fantastic, it launched a big debate of whether or not miniseries count as full-length documentaries or not. And I guess they don't want to cheat out single films that aren't part of any miniseries. So once all those guidelines are followed and the films are submitted, the members of the Academy's documentary branch will then watch as many of the films as they can and then vote for the ones they think are the best. And from those votes, a total of 15 semifinalists will be revealed in December, which is about a week from today. But it's usually mid-December when the semifinalists are revealed, so a couple of weeks from now. So those are all the rules. We'll just put those over there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over all 170 films that have been submitted for this category. I'm not going to talk about all of them in extreme detail because that would take too much time and I don't know information about every single one of them. But I will talk about some films that I have heard things about, either from IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes, or just buzz that I've heard about what films are gaining a lot of attention and what films people are saying could get nominated at the Oscars, or films that have been covered by other award shows like the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards, which will actually be my next video that I'll be putting up after this video. Alright, so these are the 170 films that have been submitted for Best Documentary Feature for the 90th Academy Awards. Abacus, Small Enough to Jail, Aida's Secrets, Al di Qua, All the Rage, All These Sleepless Nights, AlphaGo, The American Media and the Second Assassination of President John F. Kennedy, and the winner isn't. Angels Within, Architects of Denial, Arthur Miller, writer, Atomic Homefront, The B-Side, Elsa Dorfman's Portrait Photography, Bang, the Burt Burns Story, Bending the Arc, Big Sonia, Bill Nye Science Guy, Birthright, A War Story, Bobby Jean, Bombshell, The Hedy Lamarr Story, Born in China, Born to Lead, The Saul Auniz Story, Boston, Brimstone and Glory, Bronx Gothic, Burden, California Typewriter, Can't Stop, Won't Stop, A Bad Boy Story, Casting John Benet, Chasing Coral, Chasing Train, Shavela, Citizen Jane, Battle for the City, City of Ghosts, Clive Davis, The Soundtrack of Our Lives, Cries from Syria, Cruel and Unusual, Cuba and the Cameraman, Dawson City, Frozen Time, Dealt, The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson, Destination Unknown, Dina, Dolores, Dream Big, Engineering Our World, A Dying King, The Shah of Iran, Eagles of Death Metal, No Samis, Our Friends, Earth, One Amazing Day, 11-8-16, Elian, Embargo, Eric Clapton, Life in 12 Bars, Escapes, Everybody Knows Elizabeth Murray, Ex Libris, The New York Public Library, Extraordinary Ordinary People, Faces Places, The Farthest, The Final Year, Finding Oscar, 500 Years, Food Evolution, For Akeem, The Force, The Freedom to Marry, From the Ashes, Gaga, 5'2", A German Life, Get Me Roger Stone, Gilbert, God Knows Where I Am, Good Fortune, A Gray State, Hare Krishna, The Mantra, The Movement, and the Swami Who Started It All, Harold and Lillian, A Hollywood Love Story, Hearing is Believing, Hell on Earth, The Fall of Syria and the Rise of ISIS, Human Flow, I Am Another You, I Am Evidence, I Am Jane Doe, I Called Him Morgan, Icarus, If You're Not in the Obit, Eat Breakfast, The Incomparable Rose Hartman, An Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power, Intent to Destroy, Jane, Jeremiah Tower, The Last Magnificent, Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond, featuring a very special contractually obligated mention of Tony Clifton, Joan Didion, The Center Will Not Hold, Joshua, Teenager versus Superpower, Karl Marx City, Keddy, Keep Quiet, Kiki, LA 92, The Last Dalai Lama, The Last Laugh, Last Men in Aleppo, Legion of Brothers, Let It Fall, Los Angeles, 1982 to 1992, Let's Play 2, Letters from Baghdad, Long Strange Trip, Look and See, Machines, Man in Red Bandana, Mr. Gaga, A True Story of Love and Dance, Motherland, Mully, My Scientology Movie, Naples 44, Nearies, The Dream at the End of the Rainbow, Night School, No Greater Love, No Stone Unturned, Nobody Speak, Trials of the Free Press, Nowhere to Hide, Obit, Oklahoma City, One of Us, The Paris Opera, The Pathological Optimist, Prosperity, The Pulitzer at 100, Quest, Rancher, Farmer, Fisherman, The Rape of Reese Taylor, The Reagan Show, Restless Creature, Wendy Whelan, Risk, A River Below, Rocky Ross Muck, Rumble, The Indians Who Rocked the World, Santoaya, School Life, Score, a film music documentary, Served Like a Girl, The Settlers, 7852, Shadow Man, Shot, The Psycho-Spiritual Mantra of Rock, Sidemen, Long Road to Glory, The Skyjacker's Tale, Sled Dogs, Sufra, Spedicolo, Step, Stopping Traffic, The Movement to End Sex Trafficking, Strong Island, Surviving Peace, Swim Team, Take Every Wave, The Life of Laird Hamilton, Take My Nose, Please, They Call Us Monsters, 32 Pills, My Sister's Suicide, This Is Everything, Gigi Gorgeous, Tickling Giants, Trophy, 22, Unrest, Vince Giordano, There's a Future in the Past, Voyeur, Wait for Your Laugh, Wasted, The Story of Food Waste, Water and Power, A California Heist, Whitney, Can I Be Me, Whose Streets, The Work. And those are the 170 contenders for Best Documentary Feature. Now, here are some that I've heard some things about. Abacus, Small Enough to Jail, that was a big contender at the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards about a business that I believe was convicted for causing the 2008 financial crisis. Birthright, A War Story, I've heard some things about. It's about the pro-choice versus pro-life battle in the issue of abortion. Born in China is one of the documentaries that I have actually seen. That was the Disney nature film that came out this year, and it basically features all these animals in China, such as a panda, some monkeys, and a couple other animals as they live in China, and it highlights each of the 4 seasons of the year. Very good documentary. California Typewriter, I've heard a lot of things about. It's about people who choose to still use typewriters rather than computers. Chasing Coral, it's a documentary about protecting coral reefs, also a contender at the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards. And there's a song for that movie sung by Kristen Bell. A lot of documentaries about Syria on here, like City of Ghosts, which is directed by the same guy who directed the Oscar-nominated documentary Cartel Land. Cries from Syria is also about Syria. What else? Last Men in Aleppo is also about Syria. And then, of course, Hell on Earth, The Fall of Syria and the Rise of ISIS. So there's at least 4 documentaries in here that are about the ongoing conflict in Syria. The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson, I remember seeing that film on Rotten Tomatoes. That's a documentary about Marsha P. Johnson, who was an African-American transgender woman who famously participated in the 1969 Stonewall riots. She was the one who threw a brick through a window, which was considered to be the starting point of the riots. Eagles of Death Metal, Nos Amis, Our Friends. That's a documentary directed by Tom Hanks' son, Colin Hanks, and it's about the band Eagles of Death Metal, who I believe were the opening act for U2 when they were performing in Paris during the 2015 terror attacks. 11/8/16, that's of course about last year's presidential election. Ex Libris, the New York Public Library, that's the latest documentary from legendary documentary filmmaker Frederick Wiseman, who last year was awarded a Lifetime Achievement Oscar for his work. And Faces Places, that was directed by Agnes Varda, who just a few weeks ago was given a Lifetime Achievement Oscar for her work in film. And Faces Places, that's a documentary I think about Agnes Varda and her cameraman going to all these small little villages in rural France, from what I've read. Let's see, what else? I Called Him Morgan. I remember seeing that on Rotten Tomatoes. I think that's about a jazz musician that was murdered by his wife. LA 92. That's a documentary about the 1992 Los Angeles riots. Long Strange Trip. That's a documentary about the Grateful Dead. Mr. Gaga, A True Story of Love and Dance. It's about, I think, this Israeli choreographer. I remember seeing previews of this documentary when I went to go see the Oscar-nominated short films at my art house theater earlier this year, and they played this as a preview in front of it. Never got to see the actual documentary, though. Oklahoma City, that of course I believe is about the 1995 Oklahoma City bombings. The Paris Opera, that's pretty obvious, but I believe one of the people in that documentary is Benjamin Millepied, who happens to be the husband of Natalie Portman. And they met while he was the choreographer for the movie Black Swan, which, of course, won Natalie Portman the Oscar for Best Actress, and rightfully so. Risk, I've heard about that movie. That movie is about controversial WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Personally, I don't like Julian Assange at all. I think he's a slimeball and a scumbag. But that's all I'll say because I don't want to get into too much of a political discussion here. But basically, Julian Assange is one of those people you either admire him or you despise him. I despise him. But basically, it follows him as he's pretty much had to be in exile for the last few years. And the woman who directed Risk, I believe her name is Laura Poitras. She won the Oscar a couple years ago for her documentary Citizen4, which was about Edward Snowden, another person I am not really fond of. But again, politics, I don't want to get into too much of a discussion. But people who know me personally know why I do not like these two men. Because there's people on both the liberal and the conservative spectrum who like them, and then there's people on both the liberal and conservative spectrum who hate them, and I happen to hate them. Served Like a Girl, I've heard a lot of great things about. It's a documentary showcasing female veterans adapting to civilian life after serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the struggles that many of their male counterparts have often been depicted going through, like PTSD and homelessness. You know, we've seen that depicted many times with male veterans, but we've rarely seen that and how it affects female veterans. And this documentary, it has an original song written and performed, well, I don't know if written, but at least performed by Pat Benatar. So that's pretty cool right there. 7852, heard a lot of things about that. That's basically all about how the famous shower scene from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho was shot and staged, in terms of like the camera angles, the editing, what they used for the fake blood and all that. Heard a lot of great things about it. Step, I've heard a lot of amazing things about. We could possibly see that as a major contender. It's about a high school step dance team, I think, and how they go through all the various regional competitions. And that film has a song performed by Cynthia Erivo. Most people watching this probably don't know who Cynthia Erivo is, but as I believe I explained in my other video, she's a Tony Award-winning actress and singer, well now Grammy and Emmy too, all for her work in the revival of the Broadway musical The Color Purple. So she's already got 3 of the 4 prizes for EGOT status. All she needs is an Oscar. But Cynthia Erivo does have a lot of film projects coming up. Next year she's going to be in the movie Widows alongside Viola Davis. And then she's also signed up to be in the young adult book-to-film adaptation called Chaos Walking, which I believe also stars Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley. And she's also going to be in a movie called, I think it's called Bad Times at the El Royale, which is written and I think also directed by Drew Goddard, and also stars like I think Jeff Bridges and Chris Hemsworth. And then Wasted, the story of food waste. Also heard about that on Rotten Tomatoes. I believe that features, I think it's Anthony Bourdain and Guy Fieri, and it shows them trying to combat the problem of food waste, especially in restaurants. And of course, there are several documentaries on here that are about certain people, and it pretty much says so right in the name of the title, like Arthur Miller Writer. Obviously that's about Arthur Miller. Bill Nye the Science guy, obviously Bill Nye. The B-side, Elsa Dorfman's portrait photography, about a photographer named Elsa Dorfman. Casting John Bonet, I presume that's about John Benet Ramsey. Clive Davis, the soundtrack of our lives, about Clive Davis. I already mentioned The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson. Elian, that's about Elian Gonzalez, who was the little kid a long time ago who was a refugee. His mother had fled with him on a raft from Cuba to the United States, and she tragically died. And then there was this big debate of should he stay in the United States or be sent back to Cuba, and he was sent back to Cuba, but now he's all grown up. He's like 23, 24 years old now. Gaga, 5'2", obviously that's about Lady Gaga. Gilbert is about Gilbert Gottfried. Jane, which I'll be talking about in my Critics' Choice Documentary Awards video. That's about Jane Goodall. Take Every Wave, The Life of Laird Hamilton. That's about the surfer Laird Hamilton. And then This Is Everything, Gigi Gorgeous. That's a documentary about a transgender YouTube star who does fashion and makeup tutorials named Gigi Lazzarato. And this film is actually directed by Barbara Koppel, who won an Oscar for what I consider to be the best documentary of all time, Harlan County, USA. And then finally, Whitney, Can I Be Me? That's a documentary, of course, about Whitney Houston, her career, and of course her sad, tragic death. So those are all the documentaries I am familiar with. What the 15 semifinalists will be, I don't know, but I will definitely be making a video about them when the time comes, as well as going into an in-depth description about each of them when the time comes. So please stay tuned in the coming weeks for that, and please stay tuned for my next series of videos, which I shall hopefully be posting in a few days, or maybe even a couple hours after this video is posted, but probably not all at once. But coming up next after this are my videos about the winners for the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards, the contenders for Best Animated Feature, and I have 2 Golden Globes videos planned, one about the announcement of the Golden Globes Ambassador, a title that used to be called Miss or Mr. Golden Globe, as well as the announcement of the host of the Golden Globes. So stay tuned for those videos. Hopefully I'll have them all out by next week at the latest. And thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to my videos if you have not yet already done so and wish to see more, so you can get the newest ones as soon as they're uploaded. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!